Okay, Ray, I'm all set on my end.
Okay, Deb, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. The agenda has been posted at the office of the county clerk on the 23rd of April. Notice is given to West Bend News, Express News, WIBD, WTKM, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Quasim Statesman, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Item 2 is roll call. Ethan, do you have all the roll call in, or should we call in by each other?
Joe?
Should have that all, right?
I have it.
Joe says he has everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll go to item 3, agenda for the minutes of January 27th, 2020. If you have any questions, please state your name and ask the question. And for this round, if you're going to make a motion, please state your names that the secretary can write it down. And the second also. Is there any discussion on the minutes from the 27th? If not, a motion would be in order.
Don Creve will make that motion, accept the minute meetings.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Mark Petrovich, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Item 4, discussion, status of the 2017 grant budget. Deb, you're on.
Yes. You should have all gotten the project billing summary. This was the latest invoice from Stantec for the period ending April 13th, so very recent. I'm just going to make one comment on the third page. The breakdown for each of the municipalities. The Slinger amount is actually $104,400. There was just a little minor error in the addition for that. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit. There was an adjustment that needed to be made for $296.12. At the last meeting, we talked about moving some funds, moving some budget from hazardous to petroleum. And Rick was adjusting some of those numbers, not realizing that we thought we had the most current budget. We found out that there was an invoice for $296.12 from Vanderwall work that was being done that was authorized. And so we had to readjust that in the budget. I just want to make everyone aware of it. I don't know, Rick, if you wanted to say any more about that adjustment, you can go ahead.
No, well, just that it did not affect any other people's totals. We were able to take $296.12 from a miscellaneous task and then move that funding over to clear it out.
Okay. And then moving on to the program funding. This
Deb?
is a sheet that's, yes?
Could you please go back to, this is John.
Yep.
Could you go back to the Slinger? Which number was changed?
Oh,
It was the 90,500, that whole row. It's the third sheet of that billing summary.
Yeah, I've got the sheet. I'm just trying to figure out the item.
It is, well, it's actually not a specific line item for projects. It's actually at the very bottom of those 3 sheets. It summarizes the funds for the project totals for each one of the coalition partners.
Yes.
And it has Hartford at $55,750, Jackson at $6,600, Richfield for 40,000, and then Slinger for 90,500.
Mhm.
There was actually 2 projects that were missing from that. That's actually 104.
104.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
So if everybody could move ahead to the program funding. This is the one that's in color that I provided every meeting. This is the breakdown of each of the projects per municipality. I just wanted to go through that. This was updated based on the invoice from April 13th from Stantec. And if you look for each one of the local governments, West Bend is at 189,400. You can scroll down, Ethan. You go through each one of the municipalities. Slinger, that's the 104,400. You move down. Hartford's at 55,750. Jackson is at 6,600. Richfield's at 40,000. And then the town of West Bend at 425. And when you add in, if you could stop right there, Ethan. When you add in the total of that is 396. And then we also have some funds, some budget set aside for the crop updates and the Stantec and Vanderwall miscellaneous projects that they had worked on in the very beginning of the grant program. It comes out to 406,676. The total amount for the grant, which is at the very top, for tasks 2, 3, and 4 together, is 419,716, which leaves the remaining unallocated amount of the grant at 13,000. But then we add in the remainder of what was carried over from Jackson, and the village of Jackson had released those funds. We talked about that at the last meeting at $1,600. And then the EDWC had also released funds for 17,703, which leaves a total unallocated at $32,343. What this doesn't include, it doesn't include the miscellaneous sweepings from each one of those projects. And if you look back at the invoice, you'll see a project, let's say, was budgeted for 25,000, 24,980 was spent, so we have $20 remaining. So we have a lot of those $20, $3, those things, those are the sweepings. We haven't included that in the unallocated amount. At our next SRC meeting, I'll be including those funds for a grand total of the unallocated. But for the purposes of this meeting, the unallocated for tasks 2, 3, and 4 are $32,343. So if you scroll down to the next page, today the SRC is going to be looking at and considering 2 projects which we'll go through separately. The first project is for $4,500. That is not going to be taking anything from that unallocated amount. That's going to be moving funds from another project. And then there's a separate second project for $25,000. And that $25,000 would come from the unallocated amount. If the committee decides to approve those projects, then the remainder after today's meeting of unallocated would be $7,343. All right, I'm done. Any questions on the budget before we move on to the individual project approvals and considerations?
Anyone have questions?
All right.
All right, Deb, we can move on.
Yep. All right, so the first project is for an update of several phase 1 ESAs for a total of $4,500. And I'm going to have Rick talk about this in detail. And Mark, you can always chime in as well.
Yeah, I guess I should point out about a year ago or last May we did a phase 1 that included 8 properties along the West Bank and West Bend. In anticipation of those properties being the future site of the West Bank Trail. And then we did a phase 2 site assessment later on. And then now there's 3 parcels, 2 that are owned by 215 North Main LLC and 1 owned by BL Branch Group that West Bend is going to purchase. Phase 1 ESAs are typically, there's certain portions of them that are good for 6 months. And there's other portions that are good for a year. And then after that time, they need to be updated per the ASTM standard. So for the 215 North Main LLC parcels, they actually also changed the size of the parcel. And since they're going to only be purchasing that parcel, we'd like to update the phase 1 just to include that new parcel to make it clean for property transfer. And that cost we have in there at about $3,750. And then for the BL Branch Group 1 property, there actually was a phase 1 update performed for that. There's 1 component that is currently out of date as of April 18th. So we'll simply update that portion, and we have a cost of $750 for that. And then maybe Mark, you could chime in too, is the purchase of the properties will be partly financed through a state grant, and they need an update done as part of that work.
Yes, it's partially funded under a DNR grant. The issue was or the project was on a fast track. The information that's already been from the work that's been performed was needed in order to do the due diligence during the negotiations. Unfortunately, the negotiations for the property acquisition took longer than expected, and hence we missed the dates here. So we have these programmatic requirements to make the 2 reports updated. So unfortunately, it cost a little more.
Anybody have questions on these parcels?
This is Justin from the city of Hartford. Did this grant program pay for the first round of phase 1s on these properties?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve these?
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Steve Krecklow.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Kurt Pitson.
Any final discussions or questions?
We didn't get the second for the minutes.
It was from Kurt Pitson.
Did you get it?
We did. We're good.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Thank you. It passed.
Thank you.
Deb, your second one?
Yeah, so the second Request is for the former Nephos coating property in the village of Slinger. This was the emergency cleanup years back. I'm gonna hand this over to Rick, but before I do, I wanted to kind of give a little bit of an update on the project. As you know, the county's been trying to pursue a case closure on this project, and the DNR is asking for additional testing to be done before they will give that case closure. The county also had been working with the village of Slinger. We went through a request for proposals process and just awarded Forward Construction, it's Mike Lalonde, for the redevelopment of this project. So Rick, why don't you provide a little more detail on this?
Sure. So last summer, we submitted our closure request for the site. The state came back finally last fall. They had a series of questions that we answered, and then last fall they asked for some additional work to locate underground utilities on the site. And we did that work, and that was approved through this grant. We sent that in and they were very happy with it. And went back to the closure committee, and they came back with that they would like a final round of groundwater sampling done on the site. There's been a series of like 19 wells installed on the property in phases. Part of it was done by AECOM. And there's only been really one round out of all the wells. And I think the last round was like 3 or 4 years ago. So they just want to confirm that there is a groundwater plume on the property. They just want to confirm that it's not advancing. However, the wells that were installed were temporary wells and they're not there anymore. And so we would need to go back and install the wells. There's 4 on site that we found that are still in good shape that we can sample. So we would have to install up to 10 wells on the property and sample them, and then write up those results and submit it to the DNR. Hopefully, well, we're very confident that it'll be fine, because the groundwater plume is primarily for arsenic and it's just barely over the standards. And then there is, the site had a former plating shop in it, or one room that was a plating room. AECOM had taken a few floor samples and found some chromium in it, that there is a slight, it's slightly probable that it could be hazardous, as in hazardous waste. So they'd like just a few additional samples taken of that floor. And then we did have a site cap maintenance plan in our closure package. And we basically said that the entire site should be capped. They came back with saying that we could actually make it a smaller area, which is great. However, there's a cost associated with putting that through the process. So they would like a revised cap maintenance plan. Then we would submit all these results to the state, and it would go back to the closure group for consideration. And if approved, it would be closed. And the last thing we would do is properly abandon the well site. And so that's the scope of work there. We have been talking about it with the prospective purchaser of the property, and they're fine with this situation. And in fact, with respect to the floor inside the plating shop area, they are prepared to take on any costs associated with that. At least that was per our, what we talked about verbally. So, so that's it.
Okay, Margaret, do you have anything to say on that?
No, I'm extremely disappointed that DNR continues to drag this out. The lot itself isn't that big that we need this many wells, but I don't really think there's a lot we can do with DNR. They do have a closure appeals process, but that's probably just as painful as going through with what they want in the first place.
Are there any questions for Rick or Margaret?
This is Christian. Curious, is this it then? I mean, what's the prospect of something else being dug up in the next closure submittal, if you will? Because I thought we were pretty much there this last time.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We did bring that up with them. They did leave one caveat in their request, was that, you know, based on the groundwater sampling, if it turned out that concentrations were higher, the plume was migrating, that they could request further investigation. We feel that that's very unlikely. Yeah.
Answer your question, Christian?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Deb, you have anything else on this one?
No, I do not.
All right, hearing no comments or questions, is there a motion on the floor to accept this?
So
James?
moved, Christian.
One at a time, please.
This is Christian. I make a motion.
Mark
Okay, is there a
Petrovich,
second?
Mark Petrovich, I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We're good to go. That was actually item 5. The only thing left on our agenda is for the next SRC meeting. Deb, you have ideas?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that we were going to move the SRC meeting was scheduled in just a couple of weeks. And so that's actually going to be moved to closer to the end of May. And then I also wanted to know, you know, based on today's meeting and how this is set up, if needed, will this work for another meeting of the SRC? Okay.
Anybody have comments on it?
And then we'll send out a doodle poll and finalize the new meeting time and date. That's the easiest way to do it.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. And thank you, Ethan, for running the show on the back scene.
Thanks, Ethan.
I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.